kind of draw a face and then add the almond-shaped velvet eyes, and then I draw the nose, and then I'd go, did I make the nose too big? And then I'd check back with the photos and go, no, her nose definitely is that big. And then I had the hair. I'd get a big fat black brush pen to get a load of hair in there, draw the hair, go, did I make the hair too big? Check the photos, go, no, the hair's definitely that big. Add a bit more. That's the general way I draw Rosa Luxemburg. Make her really small and then put all the other people in around the top of the frame, as they probably would have been. I started off as an activist rather than a cartoonist. So I started off participating in public protest and then making cartoons about that. And in a way, the personal is political was kind of a bit of a touchstone because I was involved in political activism and then making that personal. Red Rosa was the project of Paul Buell, who is a distinguished comics academic in the US in Chicago, and he's dedicating his retirement to getting graphic biographies written of various left-wing figures. He's edited a comic history of the industrial workers of the world, and so he knew that Rosa Luxemburg was an obvious next choice. Initially I was approached saying maybe he would script it and I would draw it, but then I was like, no, I want to script it too. I jumped right in there with her literature and her letters, and I knew there was a lot there to build a book on. So I would go through and I would try and find the little paragraphs that really sort of, from her writings, almost like the tweetable bits, which is quite hard to do. So it was a question of editing and editing down, and then constructing cartoons that would explain the meaning behind her work. They're all there in the book in cartoon form, but because it's part of the comic and it's woven into the narrative, you don't feel like you're being educated when you read it. I wanted her work to be able to be translated to a wider audience of people who wouldn't necessarily be able to get through 600 pages of analytical text. Rosa Luxemburg was born in 1871. She was a tiny, crippled, female, Jewish refugee who ended up being an economist, a journalist, a lecturer, and a revolutionary socialist. A time when that wasn't really a common career option for a woman. We don't know that much about her childhood, so there's just little snippets that have been told. We do know that she was involved in socialism from a very young age, possibly even before she left school at the age of 15. At that time, people were being hanged for socialist activity, so it was dangerous. It would have been easier to have become a socialist then, is that all the inequality was in the same place. You'd have your super rich people travelling around in carriages, and then you have all the workers who are literally dying of overwork and literally starving to death. And it's happening in the same town, it's happening in the same city. This is a quote that I've got from Orwell, a paraphrase from Orwell. Of course, the poor don't feel things the same way that we do. We should suffer dreadfully if we had to live like that, but they really don't mind. And her friend's going, quite so. Now, Rosa here is looking a bit murderous and she's got a knife out. I'm not sure what she's going to do next. But in fact, she's taking a quote that she really wrote. I don't think she wrote it in a school desk. I want to burden the conscience of the affluent with all the suffering and all the hidden bitter tears. From there, I extrapolate and I bring out the tension and the drama by showing these other less intelligent, richer, more privileged children and showing the unfairness of that. That's a way of sort of giving her teenage rebellion some context. And when she initially became active in the socialist movement, it soon became clear that she would have to leave Poland because it's not like she was going to blend in. Her parents were prepared to pay to send her to university like they had her brothers as well, which was unusual for someone at that time. So it happened with the support of her family that she went off to become this incredible thinker and lecturer. She went to Switzerland to university. She went to Germany. Rosa Luxemburg moved to Berlin in the early 1890s, socialism was legal in Germany, as long as you were a German citizen. So she immediately married a German citizen so that she could start getting involved in the German Social Democratic Party. It was a rapidly growing party. At the outbreak of the First World War, it was finally the largest party in the Reichstag. In a way, I think the fact that she was a woman made it easier to not compromise her opposition to capitalism, because if she was a man who was able to be voted into the Reichstag, immediately then you get a pressure on you to only do what's electable, to push for what's comfortable or achievable. And Rosa Luxemburg was very scathing of this movement. She called it opportunism, this tendency within social democracy. The Problem with Socialism by Edward Bernstein. I'll tell you what the problem is with socialism. The problem is this attempt by a petty bourgeois idiot to redefine the direction of our party. How dare he call himself a socialist? He thought that as capitalism develops things like credit systems within it, that it will stop imploding from time to time. Now, Luxemburg wrote a brilliant riposte to this. When the tendency of capitalist production to expand limitlessly strikes against the limited size of private capital, credit steps in to surmount those limits. Credit aggravates the inevitable crisis. It accelerates the exchange of commodities. It provokes overproduction. It helps to bring on and extend the crisis by transforming all exchange into an extremely complex and artificial mechanism which is easily disarranged at the slightest occasion. There is such a thing as Luxemburgism. It would be an implacable opposition to capitalism, structural opposition to capitalism. She's not into the idea of making capitalism better. She's into the idea of getting rid of capitalism and replacing it with something better. And then I have to somehow incorporate the meaning of that into the text. So the way that I do that is I take small segments of the work that give a proper flavour of it, and then I illustrate it with visual metaphors. Now, the accumulation of capital isn't a very easy thing to make interesting. So I have her relating it in a conversation with her cat, because everyone likes cats. And then I can use the cat at this point. We're led to believe that the market simply grows bigger because the market grows bigger. The logic is circular. Yes, Mimi, like a cat chasing its tail. Imperialism, Mimi. Capitalism expands by forcing its way into non-capitalist markets. It must in order to exist. Capitalism can never peacefully coexist with other forms of existence. It is a rampaging tiger committed to the destruction or absorption of all other ways of life except its own. Force is the only solution available to capitalism. The accumulation of capital employs force as a permanent weapon. That's one of my favourite quotes of Luxemburg. And I've emphasised it here by her having a First World War bayonet, bayoneting her own papers and dripping inky blood. Rosa Luxemburg was imprisoned indefinitely during the First World War for opposing it. She was deemed an enemy of the people, and she was locked up in Ronca Fortress. And it's pretty harsh to be imprisoned without a release date. And you would have expected it to have ground her down, and it seems to have done the opposite. She writes the most poetic and indescribably lovely passages of prose in her letters. You have no idea how blue the sky was today. I stood with my little watering can dripping in my hand, and I felt a tremendous yearning to dive up into that damp, shimmering blueness, to bathe in it, to splash around, to let myself dissolve completely in that dew and disappear. Only one thing torments me, that I shouldn't be enjoying so much beauty all by myself. I want to shout out loud over the walls, oh please pay attention to this marvellous day, because this day will never ever come again. This day is a gift to you, like a rose in full bloom, lying at your feet, waiting for you to pick it up and press it to your lips. The revolution happened about the 9th of November 1918. It seemed like it was going to be very similar to events in Russia. It starts off with the first sailors revolting at Wilhelmshaven naval base, and then from then people take charge all over the streets, and as though it's going to be the same as in Russia, they get rid of the existing social order, they get rid of the king, and they put the socialists in charge. What was really fun about doing the German Revolution was that at this point you've got documentary source photos, so you can see exactly what people look like. You didn't have to hold a pose in a studio anymore. You could take a snapshot. It was a recent invention, the Kodak pocket vest camera. So here we can see people who actually were revolutionaries, and they've written Hoch liebe die Revolution handily so we can see them. So there's lots going on here, trying to get a real sense of movement and adventure going on. I'm trying to get a big crowd of people and loads of buildings, but since I hate drawing crowds of people and buildings, I've also put lots of trees in the way, which I like drawing, and lots of flags and slogans, so I don't have to draw quite so many people in hats. Luxemburg was in prison. She was released the following day, made a speech to the waiting crowds at the gate, and then travelled off to Berlin. And she was at the heart of agitating. She wasn't keen on just trying to overthrow the existing order and replacing it with a couple of men at the top. That's a direct quote. She wanted to build the movement from the bottom up. We must have unflagging spirits and iron concentration of energy in order to... Oh, don't wake her. She hasn't slept properly for weeks. What was that? Oh, in order to continue the work. The abolition of capitalism could only be born of the conscious action of the masses. Mathilde, how could you let me sleep? Awaken me at once in future. The socialists they put in charge are an established parliamentary party, and some of them prove immediately extremely willing to form compromises and to form alliances with the old order. So from the first day that Fritz Ebert took office, he would have been in conversation with the head of the German army and was organising for an armed suppression of any subsequent revolutionary tendencies. Order prevails in Berlin? You foolish lackeys, your order is built on sand. Tomorrow, the revolution will rise up again, clashing its weapons, and it will proclaim with trumpets blazing, I was, I am, I shall be. Our entire population can suddenly arise from their passive state and spring into activity. Her writings on that are always relevant. It's always worth bearing in mind that even if it looks like you're living in a period of relative stability, the seeds of revolution are probably always there. It's what to do with it next.